My parents called me a selfish disappointment and threw me out the day I turned 18 because I wouldn't hand over any of my college scholarship money. 5 years later, I'm doing great, and they came to my door expecting me to let them move in because family takes care of family. But I just said no, shut the door, and when they kept showing up and calling, I got a restraining order. My own brother just forged my signature to steal my house. And in that terrifying moment, I realized he wasn't just trying to take my property, he was trying to erase me. The air in my apartment garage that Thursday afternoon felt heavy, thick with the day's humidity and the unspoken tension that always seemed to follow his name. My phone buzzed. Ethan. I just stared at the screen, a primal part of me screaming not to answer. But curiosity, that old, familiar lure, won out. For most of my 30-something years, I'd been Lucas, the quiet one, the guy who preferred to stay out of the spotlight. I've always believed people show you who they are eventually, you just have to watch. That philosophy served me well growing up in a family where appearances were everything, and quiet resentment simmered beneath every forced smile. Ethan, my older brother by 2 years, was the polar opposite. He was the golden child, the loud one, always center stage with his flashy stories and jokes that everyone, especially our mom, Eleanor, somehow found hilarious, even when they didn't quite add up. They treated him like he could do no wrong. Me? I was the good kid in the background, the one who remembered to lock the doors and return the shopping cart. Recognition wasn't something I expected. Growing up, Ethan would borrow my stuff without asking, blame me when things went missing, and our parents would just shrug it off. He's just being a big brother, they'd say. If I so much as rolled my eyes, I'd get the full respect your elders lecture. I learned early to keep my head down and not expect fairness. While Ethan scraped by on charm and excuses, crashing 2 of our parents' cars by 20, I buried myself in books and paid for my own car by 22. Yet, somehow, he was the accomplished one because he talked about starting a business someday. That someday turned into a decade of vague projects and failed side hustles. Meanwhile, I built a life that didn't make much noise. After college, I got a steady job in logistics, lived below my means, and spent weekends helping my Uncle Robert maintain his old family estate. He never married, had no kids, and I'd always been close to him. He liked that I showed up without being asked, that I didn't treat his house like a free vacation spot, unlike Ethan. When Uncle Robert passed away a year ago, he left everything to me. It surprised no one, really, except Ethan. He called the night after the will reading. Wow, that must feel weird, huh? Getting something you didn't earn. I just stared at my phone after that. I didn't reply. Something in me finally clicked off. For 31 years, I'd swallowed comments like that, letting them pass, telling myself he didn't mean it, that he was insecure or jealous. Whatever excuse I could find to keep the peace. But there's only so many times someone can undermine you before it stops feeling like brotherly ribbing and starts feeling like contempt. Ethan never fails quietly. When something goes wrong in his life, he throws a tantrum or points fingers. And when he smells even a whiff of success on someone else, especially me, it curdles something inside him. That became crystal clear during Eleanor's birthday dinner. We were at some overpriced restaurant with dim lighting and loud tablecloths. The conversation was already rocky. Ethan, 3 drinks in, was talking over everyone about his latest massive opportunity, some crypto investing food truck gym hybrid. I mostly listened, nodded when appropriate. I'd gotten good at that. Then he started talking about how some people spend their whole lives chasing security instead of success. His words, not even subtle. Right as the waiter refilled our waters, he turned to me with that smug, half-smile. Isn't that right, Lucas? You'd know. I mean, not everyone's cut out for ambition. He chuckled like he'd just made the most charming joke. Everyone else went quiet. Eleanor gave a tight little smile, pretending she didn't hear it. My dad, Arthur, looked at his fork. I just took a sip of my red wine, dry, bitter. My mouth was dry, too, but not from the wine. I didn't respond out loud, but something about that moment felt different. I didn't feel embarrassed, didn't feel the need to defend myself. I just felt done. Done playing the quiet brother who lets things slide for family harmony. Done being a background character in my own life so Ethan could keep his inflated sense of superiority. That dinner ended like all our family dinners, awkward hugs, half-hearted goodbyes, promises to catch up soon that no one meant. But something had shifted. I could feel it. Ethan had no idea what was coming. And I wasn't going to warn him. Let him keep talking. Let him feel big. Let him believe I was the failure. Because a week later, I got a call. And that's where things started to get interesting. The call came on a Thursday. I was pulling into my apartment garage, trying to beat traffic, when Ethan's name buzzed on my screen. I stared at it. I hadn't heard from him since the dinner, and part of me debated whether to pick up. Curiosity won. "Hey man, got a sec?" he said, chipper, like we were lifelong pals who hadn't just had a weird family dinner. "Sure," I said cautiously, killing the engine. "What's up?" "So, listen," he began, breezy. "You know, I've been working on that new venture, right? The boutique fitness line, custom apparel meets wellness content?" The one he'd barely mentioned between swipes at my life choices. "Yeah," I replied, keeping my voice neutral. "Well, I finally secured a partner investor out of Phoenix. Guy's a beast, but we need to move fast. I'm locking down the capital side now, just need to finalize the bank loan. Super standard. Nothing crazy, but they need someone to co-sign. Just formality." My stomach tightened. I knew exactly where this was going. He kept talking as if he hadn't noticed the silence. The underwriter just needs someone with stable income, good credit, and some tied assets to sign on. Temporary, 6 months max. You wouldn't even feel it. No actual liability. I leaned back in the seat, staring at the garage ceiling. "And you want me to co-sign?" "Yeah," he said without a shred of hesitation. "I mean, you're the obvious choice. You've got the house now, right? Uncle Robert's place. The deed's already transferred, isn't it?" I didn't answer that directly. Instead, I asked, "Why not ask Mom and Dad?" "Oh, come on." He laughed, like I'd made a joke. "They're not going to sign anything. You know how Dad is with his credit score paranoia. And Mom, she'd have a nervous breakdown if you handed her a legal document. No offense, but you're the only one who actually owns anything or makes enough. You're set up. It's not even a favor. Really, more like a temporary bridge. A bridge. That's how he saw me. A structure to walk over to get somewhere better." I said nothing for a beat. He added quickly, "Obviously, I'll throw you some equity in the company once things take off. We're talking real valuation potential here. You'd be an early stakeholder. Win-win." That call ended with me telling him I'd think about it. Not because I needed time, I already knew what my answer was, but because I wanted him to stew. To let that desperation build just a little longer. He hung up, assuming I'd cave. And that's the problem with Ethan. He's lived his whole life assuming I'd always say yes, or at the very least, never say no. He got used to the idea of me being the fallback guy, the one who didn't argue, the one who bailed him out without questions. But I was getting real tired of that role. Still, the call opened a floodgate I hadn't prepared for. Over the next few days, I got texts from Eleanor. First casual, "Hey sweetie, just wanted to check in. Ethan said he mentioned something about a loan. Maybe you could help him out." Then more direct, "He's finally got a real opportunity, Lucas. This could be his big break. Don't be stubborn." Stubborn. That word stung a little. Then came the call from Arthur, who rarely ever called. His tone was clipped, almost formal. I know Ethan's had his missteps, he said, which was a hilarious understatement. But he's trying to turn a corner. Maybe you could support him. That's what family does, right? What family does. Interesting. I didn't recall Ethan supporting me when I was working 2 jobs through college or pulling 16-hour shifts during the supply chain crisis last year. He didn't even show up to Uncle Robert's funeral, claiming he was out of state on business, though I later saw tagged photos of him at a pool party that same weekend. But now I was the one being difficult. I didn't respond to any of it. Just let the silence do the work. I could feel the tension rising with each ignored message. But what really twisted the knife was what happened that Sunday. My parents invited me over for lunch. They framed it as casual. Eleanor even said, just some family time, nothing serious. But the second I walked into their house, I knew I'd walked into a setup. Ethan was already there, perched on the living room couch like a smug peacock. He stood when he saw me, arms open like we were long-lost war buddies. "Lucas, good, you're here," he said as if I were late to a meeting he'd scheduled. My parents smiled too wide. Eleanor had that desperate shine in her eyes that only came out when she was trying to smooth over something ugly with fake warmth. Arthur clapped me on the back like we were teammates. The whole vibe was off. We sat down. Eleanor brought out iced tea and some cookies. And Ethan launched into his pitch again, this time with slides. Literal slides on a tablet he had ready. "I just want to show you the numbers," he said, tapping through charts and projections. "We've got brand partnerships lined up. Influencer outreach scheduled. This thing's going to fly." I sipped my tea, watched him talk, noticed the way he didn't once ask how I was doing or what I'd been up to. The conversation was entirely about him, his plans, his vision, his success, contingent, of course, on me co-signing a 5-figure loan. When he was done, he looked at me expectantly. "So," he said, "you in?" I glanced at my parents. Eleanor was wringing her hands in her lap. Arthur gave me a look that said, "Just go along with it." I set the glass down and said, "I haven't decided." That wiped the smile off Ethan's face. "What's there to decide?" he asked like the concept of me needing time was insulting. "I need to think it through," I repeated calmly. His jaw tightened. "It's not like you're risking anything." Actually, I was. But more than that, I wasn't about to let him pretend this was a harmless little favor. I knew how Ethan operated. If the business flopped, and statistically most do, I'd be the one stuck holding the bag. And even if it didn't, he'd never give me credit. I'd become part of his success story in the worst way, the invisible scaffolding that held him up while he bragged about being self-made. After that lunch, things got nastier. He started sending me links to articles about supporting your siblings, inspirational quotes about trusting family. One even said, "Real brothers don't keep score." The irony made me laugh out loud. A few days later, I bumped into our cousin Clara at the grocery store. She greeted me with a hug and then casually said, "Hey, I heard you're making Ethan jump through hoops for that loan." Kind of harsh, isn't it? So, he was running a PR campaign now. Even Aunt Brenda called me. Aunt Brenda, who hadn't spoken to me in over a year since I didn't show up to her dog's birthday party. She launched into a speech about how families succeed together or fail together. I politely told her to go pet her schnauzer and hung up. Meanwhile, Ethan started posting cryptic things on social media. It's always the ones you think will have your back who disappoint you the most. Lesson learned. And, some people talk about loyalty. Others just drink wine and watch you drown. Wine. Real subtle. Friends started asking if we were okay. I told them the truth, we're brothers. That was enough of an explanation. The pressure campaign was working overtime. But what none of them knew, what even Ethan didn't know, was that the bank had already reached out to me. because yes, my name was on the deed, and yes, it was required for the loan, but they'd contacted me directly as the primary title holder to ask for verification and consent. I hadn't signed. I hadn't refused either. I'd simply said, not at this time. And just like that, his application stalled. I didn't hear from him for 3 days. Total radio silence. Then one evening, he showed up at my door. No warning. Just knocked loud and fast like he was entitled to be let in. I opened it and saw him standing there, hair a mess, eyes bloodshot, clutching a crumpled folder of paperwork. "Can we talk?" he asked. I stepped aside and let him in. Not because I owed him, but because I wanted to see how far he'd go. He paced around my living room like a caged animal, muttering about bureaucracy and timelines and idiots who don't understand vision. Eventually, he turned to me. "I need you to sign this today. If we don't get it through by Friday, the deal dies." I looked at the folder, then at him. "Why me, Ethan? Really? Why not go to your investor or get a smaller loan or scale down?" His mouth twisted. "Because they want a tangible asset behind it. And you have one. Uncle Robert gave it to you, not because you earned it, but because he pitied you. You were his project." I stood up. Heart pounding. There it was. The truth. Not just entitlement, but disdain. He didn't see me as family. He saw me as a resource, a soft touch, a safety net. And in that moment, I made my decision. But I didn't say it out loud. Not yet. I just looked him dead in the eye and let the silence speak. And as I watched him shift, uncomfortable for the first time in a long time, I knew the real show was just beginning. Ethan left my apartment that night with a tight jaw and a stiff nod, clutching the folder like it was his lifeline. He didn't say thank you, didn't apologize, didn't even pretend to respect my hesitation. He left assuming I'd come around, that I was just being dramatic, that I'd eventually do what I always did, bend. But something about that conversation stayed with me. I didn't sleep well. My mind kept going back to his words. "You didn't earn it. Uncle Robert pitied you." The nerve of that. After everything I'd done, visiting Uncle Robert every weekend, fixing the leaky roof, shoveling snow, organizing his medication, sitting with him when he got too tired to speak. Ethan had the audacity to call that pity. As if I hadn't been the only one showing up. But what came next? That's what really broke me. 2 days passed with no word. Then, out of nowhere, I got a call from the bank. A different rep this time. The tone was professional but a little confused. "Mr. Palmer," the woman said, "we received the updated deed document this morning with your digital signature confirming co-signature approval for Mr. Ethan Palmer's loan. Just doing a routine follow-up to confirm submission was legitimate before processing." My stomach dropped. "I'm sorry," I said slowly. "What document?" "The updated property deed cosign agreement. It lists your electronic approval via DocuSign and was uploaded through the partner portal this morning. Timestamped at 9:42 a.m. My blood went cold. "I never signed anything," I told her. "I haven't touched a document." There was a pause on her end. I could hear her clicking through something. That's strange. It says the form was signed using your registered email and matching last 4 digits of your SSN. I'll go ahead and flag this for further verification. Thank you for confirming." I hung up, heart racing, and immediately opened my email. Nothing from DocuSign. No alerts, no requests, no confirmations. Then I checked my spam folder, and there it was. A single notification timestamped at 9:42 a.m. confirming a signed document with my name on it. I clicked through, and my chest tightened. It was the deed cosign agreement. My name, my email, even my digital signature copied from a prior form I'd signed years ago when transferring ownership of Uncle Robert's utilities. It was forged. I didn't even need to guess who did it. I opened a new tab and logged into my cloud storage, where I'd stored scanned PDFs of the house documents. The access history showed a login 3 days ago from a new device, a MacBook, not mine. Ethan. I remembered he'd borrowed my laptop once when his crashed. He must have saved the password somewhere. Or worse. He had snooped and grabbed copies of the original files without me knowing. My hands were shaking. Not out of fear, not even anger. Disgust. He didn't even ask again. He just decided to take. He'd crossed a line I didn't think he was capable of crossing. And the worst part? He probably thought he could explain it away, spin it into another misunderstanding, something he could fix with a joke or a half apology. I called the bank immediately and filed a fraud report. I explained what happened. They froze the application and locked the digital access, pending investigation. They told me to expect a follow-up from their legal team. I spent the rest of that afternoon changing passwords, securing my accounts, and texting an old college friend who worked in IT security. He walked me through checking for malware and setting up alerts. I wasn't taking any chances. And then, just when I thought it couldn't get any worse, Eleanor called. Not to check on me. Not to ask if I was okay after learning her son committed fraud using my name. No. She called to yell. Lucas, what on earth did you tell the bank? I blinked. What? Ethan just called me in tears. You embarrassed him. You got his loan frozen. Why would you do that to him? My jaw dropped. Because he forged my signature. He committed fraud. He tried to use my identity without my consent. Maybe he made a mistake, she said, her voice shaking, but not with concern, more like with desperation. You know how badly he needs this. He said you were dragging your feet, that you weren't being supportive. Mom, I said, trying to stay calm. He used my social security number. That's not a mistake. That's a felony. She didn't respond right away. I could hear her breathing shallow and fast. Finally, she said, he's your brother. And I lost it. For how long does that excuse work? I snapped. How many times does he get to lie, steal, manipulate, and hide behind he's your brother? She was quiet. I could picture her in the kitchen, wringing a dish towel, eyes darting toward the doorway, hoping Arthur would walk in and smooth things over. This isn't a squabble over toys, Mom, I continued. He committed actual identity fraud. I could lose my house over this. I could go to court, and you're calling to scold me? I'm not scolding, she began. But I cut her off. Yes, you are. You always do. You act like he's this fragile child who needs to be protected, and I'm the stone you throw at problems to make them disappear. That silenced her again. I have done everything right, I said, voice low. I've never asked you for anything. Not when I was broke. Not when Dad forgot my birthday 3 years in a row. Not when Uncle Robert got sick and I needed help. I never threw fits. I never stole. And yet somehow every time Ethan messes up, I'm the one who gets the guilt trip. Her voice was small. He's just struggling. He's been struggling for 12 years, I said. At what point do we call it what it is? She didn't answer. I hung up. I don't regret it, but I won't lie, it hurt. I sat on my couch for a long time after that, staring at the ceiling, not angry, just hollow, like a balloon that had finally deflated after holding its shape for years. The next morning, Arthur showed up at my door. He looked tired, older. His hair was more gray than I remembered. He didn't ask to come in, just stood there on the porch, hat in his hand. Your mother told me everything, he said quietly. I didn't say anything. I'm not here to defend what he did, he added. What he did was wrong. No excuse. That surprised me. Arthur always played referee. He hated confrontation, especially when it involved choosing sides. Seeing him there, so solemn, felt like something had cracked. He looked past me into my apartment. "You've done well," he said, almost like it hurt to admit it. "I don't say it enough." I nodded. "Thanks." Then he added, "But he's still your brother." And there it was again. That sentence, that unspoken rule, that ancient family code etched into every interaction we'd ever had. I didn't say anything. I just shut the door. Not hard, not loud, just firm. That night, I got a call from the bank again. They'd completed their preliminary investigation. The signature was indeed falsified. The metadata on the file confirmed it had been edited from a device that wasn't mine. They were freezing the application indefinitely and flagging Ethan in their internal fraud database. They gave me the option of pressing charges. I told them I needed time to think because deep down some small, shrinking part of me still wanted to believe this could be salvaged. That Ethan would call, apologize, explain. But that's not what happened. Instead, he doubled down. The next day, he posted a long rant on Facebook. It started with a vague, "Some people will always be jealous of those who take risks," and spiraled into a full-blown character assassination. He painted himself as the visionary, the dreamer, the one who was trying to lift himself up while I, the bitter younger brother, pulled him down out of spite. He didn't name me, but he didn't have to. Everyone knew. Comments poured in. Some supportive, some skeptical, but the one that gutted me was from our own cousin Clara. "Honestly, this tracks. Lucas has always been kind. Of uptight. No offense. No offense." It was like my whole life had been rewritten by Ethan's version, and people believed it because he said it louder, flashier, with more emojis. All I had was the truth. But the truth didn't matter to people who were addicted to his drama, to the theatrics, to the carefully crafted story of the underdog older brother who just needed a little help from his stingy, bitter sibling. And that's when I realized this wasn't just a betrayal. This was war. After the Facebook post, everything got quiet. Not the peaceful, resolved quiet. It was the heavy kind, like the air before a storm. The kind of silence where every phone buzz makes you flinch. Every knock on the door feels like it might come with bad news. And even the people who once smiled at you in passing suddenly look away like you're carrying something contagious. I didn't respond publicly. I didn't clap back or post some righteous thread defending myself. I didn't even comment on anyone's response, though I read all of them twice. I saw the likes Ethan's post got from old friends, second cousins, even people I hadn't spoken to since high school. It was like watching people walk past a burning house and toss a marshmallow on the way. But I stayed silent, not because I was scared, but because I knew something Ethan never had the patience to learn. People always reveal themselves, and the longer you stay still, the more they dance in front of you thinking they've already won. Still, that didn't mean it didn't hurt. There's something uniquely brutal about being painted as the villain in your own family, especially when you've spent your whole life being the stable one, the reliable one. I was the guy who babysat cousins at the last minute, showed up early to weddings to help with the setup, and sent birthday cards when nobody else remembered. I'd always kept my head down, hoping that one day it would count for something, that my quiet loyalty would be recognized. But now I was the bitter little brother, the jealous one, the failure who didn't want his brother to succeed. And the worst part? I didn't know who believed it. Calls stopped. Invitations to family get-togethers vanished. Aunts and uncles I used to see every few months suddenly weren't hosting this year. I found out from a neighbor that there had been a barbecue at my parents' house the previous weekend when I was very clearly not invited. My cousin David, who used to ask me for job references and interview tips, unfollowed me on LinkedIn. It was like someone had flipped a switch, and I'd become radioactive. I tried to keep going with my life. I buried myself in work, took extra shifts, offered to cover for a coworker going on paternity leave just so I'd have something, anything, to keep my mind from spinning. But it followed me home every night. I'd walk past the front room of Uncle Robert's house, the one I hadn't finished renovating yet, and feel a wave of guilt and bitterness. That room was supposed to be a library, a peaceful space. But all I saw now was everything I'd lost while trying to do things the right way. And then came the real gut punch. The county tax assessor's office sent me a letter saying there had been a formal inquiry filed disputing the legitimacy of the deed transfer on Uncle Robert's property. An anonymous claim alleging that the inheritance was inappropriately secured and in conflict with prior family expectations. I called the number listed. The woman on the line was polite but firm. She said the office was required to investigate all formal disputes regardless of merit. She couldn't tell me who filed it, but she didn't need to. There was only one person petty, angry, and reckless enough to try to blow up the one thing in my life that actually mattered to me. I hung up, hands shaking. This wasn't just an attack. It was sabotage. And for the first time in years, I cried. Not just a few tears. I mean, the kind of crying you do when it finally hits you that the people you've spent your whole life trying to make proud were never going to see you. Not really. That you were always going to be the backup, the utility, the silent support beam that no one noticed until it cracked under the weight of being everyone else's foundation. I didn't answer calls for days. I muted every group chat. I skipped a company happy hour I'd been looking forward to. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. I just sat in that half-renovated library room, surrounded by paint cans and old books and the dust of a man who actually believed in me, and wondered how things had come to this. I felt like a stranger in my own story. That was rock bottom. But even then, something was shifting. A strange calm settled over me. It wasn't peace exactly. It was more like resolve. A clarity that came not from inspiration, but from having absolutely nothing left to lose. That night, I went through Uncle Robert's files. I pulled out every document, his will, the title transfer, the notarized paperwork, every receipt from every time I paid for repairs or materials out of pocket. I made a digital folder and backed it up in 3 places. I booked an appointment with a real estate lawyer I'd met once during the transfer process. She remembered me. "You're the nephew who showed up in work boots," she said on the phone. "Come by, we'll get it sorted." I felt something stir in me, a heartbeat, the first flicker of momentum. Then I did something else. Something small but important. I made a list. It wasn't a revenge list. Not exactly. Just a column of facts, dates, interactions, screenshots, bank statements, a paper trail. Not to use right away, but to have. Because if this was going to escalate, and I knew Ethan well enough to assume it would, I wasn't going to be caught off guard again. And while I was doing that, I started quietly walking away. I unfriended people silently. No drama, no calls, just gone. I deleted old text threads, archived emails, changed the locks. I went to a local cafe and met with an old friend I hadn't seen in a year. Someone who used to work with me before she moved on to a consulting firm. We sat by the window, drank coffee, and laughed about things unrelated to Ethan or my family or the lawsuit I could feel looming on the horizon. That moment was the first I'd felt like myself in weeks. The next day, I got a text from Arthur. "Can we talk?" I ignored it. He followed up with a voicemail. I didn't listen. Then a third message. "Your mother's very upset. Ethan said you're hiring lawyers now. Do you really want to take this that far?" That far? As if I had been the one to forge signatures. As if I had been the one to file a fake complaint with the tax office. As if I had been the one dragging our family through the mud. I turned my phone off for 2 full days. No messages, no drama, no updates. And in that silence, I remembered what it felt like to have peace. I started waking up early again, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. I made breakfast, real food, eggs and toast, not just gas station coffee. I went for walks. I deleted Facebook. I stopped checking who was still in my corner and started building my own. By the time the lawyer called me back with the news that the dispute against my deed was officially dismissed due to lack of merit and clear ownership documentation, I didn't even smile. I just nodded. Of course, it was. Ethan's reach had always been shallow. Loud, yes, but shallow. His whole world was built on noise, and noise only works when people pay attention. I was done paying attention, but he wasn't done. A week after the dismissal, I found out Ethan had taken a job with one of those influencer incubator startups, the kind that sells motivational merch and hustle lifestyle branding while bleeding investors dry. I knew it wouldn't last. But more importantly, I knew it meant he was still out there trying to build something, still trying to sell himself as a success, which meant he still needed something, credibility. And I was the one person left who could ruin that with a single conversation. I didn't do anything. Not yet. But I kept the folder open on my laptop. I kept the emails, the screenshots, the voicemail from the bank, the fake signature, the digital trail. I kept it all and waited. Because rock bottom doesn't mean you stay down. Sometimes it's just where you stop sinking long enough to push off. Rock bottom didn't announce its exit. It didn't send a notice or leave a parting gift. It just slowly loosened its grip. I started noticing it in the quiet, mundane moments, those little pockets of stillness that didn't feel like dread anymore. I'd wake up and for once not feel like I was bracing for an emotional sucker punch. I'd walk into work without feeling like I was dragging invisible chains behind me. Even the old hardwood floors in Uncle Robert's house didn't creak with that heavy, haunted tone anymore. They sounded like what they were, just floors. The house, which had become a symbol of conflict, started to feel like mine again. I repainted the library, the one room that had been left untouched during the chaos. I picked a deep navy blue for the walls and added warm amber lighting. I cleared out the old furniture and replaced it with pieces I found secondhand. Solid wood, minimalist, comfortable. Then I built shelves, dozens of them, by hand. I used Uncle Robert's old tools, the ones I'd learned to use as a teenager under his supervision. Each night, I worked on those shelves, slowly restoring what had once been a room of solitude and turning it into something even better, something that would become the heart of the home. Meanwhile, my career began to shift. I didn't realize how much mental energy Ethan had been draining from me until I felt it returning. I became more present at work, more proactive. I started offering ideas in meetings that I would have second-guessed before. I led a project reworking a supply chain system for one of our biggest clients, and it ended up saving them 11% in transportation costs. My manager took notice. So did the regional director. 3 months after that disastrous family barbecue I hadn't been invited to, I got promoted. Not just a raise, an actual title bump, operations lead. With it came a bigger office, a flexible schedule, and enough clout that I was suddenly getting emails from people who used to ignore me. My opinion mattered. My presence mattered. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't just the dependable guy in the background. I was steering things. I didn't tell anyone in my family. Not because I wanted to be petty, but because it felt sacred, like something that didn't need to be polluted by their reactions or buried under another Ethan conversation. It was mine. Around that same time, my social life began to quietly mend itself, too. Remember that friend I met for coffee? Chloe. We'd always been close, but life had pulled us in different directions. After that catch-up, we started talking more, grabbing dinner once a week, then twice, then going on weekend hikes. She was one of the few people who never asked me to explain the situation with Ethan. She didn't press for gossip or give me unsolicited advice. She just listened when I wanted to talk and let the silence sit comfortably when I didn't. 6 months after the forged document fiasco, she invited me to her sister's wedding as her plus one. That night, while we were slow dancing under a string of fairy lights in a backyard full of tipsy strangers, she leaned in and said, "You're not nearly as invisible as you think you are." You know, that hit me harder than any insult Ethan had ever thrown. Because she was right. I'd spent years fading into the background, thinking that being quiet meant being overlooked. But I was wrong. Quiet didn't mean weak. It didn't mean passive. It just meant I was saving my energy for things that mattered. And now I had energy to spare. I started volunteering with a local mentorship program that paired professionals with high school seniors interested in logistics and operations careers. It felt good to pour into someone without an agenda, to answer questions from kids who reminded me of myself, curious, cautious, unsure if they belonged in spaces that rarely made room for them. And the house came alive. I finished the library and turned the guest room into a creative space. Not for me necessarily, but for whoever might use it one day. I hosted a couple of coworkers for a small dinner party, something I never thought I'd do. We drank wine, the good kind this time, played cards, and shared stories without any competitive edge. No one trying to one-up the other. There was laughter in the house again. Real laughter. Even my neighbors, who'd kept their distance during the family drama, started waving when they saw me outside. One of them, a retired contractor named Stan, offered to help me replace the fencing around the back garden. We spent weekends working on it together, and he ended up becoming something of a surrogate uncle figure. "You've got a good head on your shoulders," he told me one day, wiping sweat from his brow. "Don't let leeches make you forget that." Leeches. I didn't need to ask who he was referring to. By now, Ethan had become a whisper in the wind. I heard little things through mutual acquaintances, distant relatives, social media I no longer followed but occasionally peeked at through burner tabs. His startup folded in 4 months. He blamed internal miscommunication and market instability. The truth? Investors pulled out when one of them found out about the flagged bank incident. Something that had quietly followed him. It wasn't public, but in those circles, word spreads fast. Apparently, he tried applying to another logistics firm 3 weeks later, one Julian Vance had ties to. He didn't even get a second interview. The funny thing is, I didn't feel triumphant. Not in the way I thought I would. There was no slow-motion victory lap, no champagne cork popping in the background, just peace. I was finally free of him. But the real fallout came when Eleanor called. It was a rainy Thursday afternoon. I remember because I was organizing the last of the books in Uncle Robert's library, the final piece in a project that had taken me the better part of a year. I had just placed a copy of Dune on the top shelf when my phone buzzed on the coffee table. "Mom, incoming call." I let it ring twice before answering. "Hello?" Her voice cracked immediately. "Lucas?" It was a whisper, the kind you only hear when someone's already lost the argument they haven't started yet. "Hi, Mom." I talked to Ethan. Silence. He told me what happened, or his version of it. She sniffled. "Said you embarrassed him, destroyed his reputation, cost him his job." I didn't respond. "He sounded broken," she added, as if that was somehow my doing, like someone who doesn't know what to do next. I waited, but then she said slowly, "I talked to Julian." That made me pause. "I called the company," she admitted, used his name, asked to speak to someone. I needed to know if it was true. I needed to hear it from someone who wasn't you or Ethan. And I asked, and he confirmed everything. Said you handled it professionally, that you were calm, respectful, that Ethan had stolen your work and tried to pass it off as his. I said nothing. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Those 2 words landed harder than any insult ever had. For what? For not believing you. For blaming you. For being so blind. Her voice broke again. I thought I was protecting him, but all I did was enable him. I let him lie and lie. And every time you told the truth, I made you feel like the villain. A long pause. You were never the problem, Lucas. He was. He still is. I felt something heavy loosen in my chest. Not quite forgiveness, but release. I appreciate you saying that, I replied. We talked a little longer about the house, about Chloe, about work. She didn't ask to come visit, and I didn't offer. The gap between us was still there, but for the first time in my life, she saw it too. And that was enough. A few days later, I got a letter, a real one, handwritten. Sloppy penmanship on a folded piece of lined notebook paper. The kind you'd expect from a teenager grounded for lying about curfew. Not from a 30-something man who had once tried to destroy your life. Lucas, I messed up worse than ever before. I know you don't owe me anything. Not even the time to read this, but I wanted to say it clearly. I'm sorry. Not the half sorry I've given you in the past. Not the kind that tries to make excuses. Just sorry. I was jealous of you for years. Still am, probably. You've always been the better brother, smarter, kinder, more disciplined. I hated you for it because deep down I knew I couldn't compete. So, I tore you down instead. You didn't deserve that. You never did. I've been trying to fix things, but every door feels shut now. I get why you won't answer. I get why you didn't warn me at the retreat. I wouldn't have either. I don't expect you to forgive me. But I wanted to write this before I disappear for a while. I'm moving. Don't know where yet. Just away. Going to try to rebuild. Actually, rebuild. Maybe that starts with telling the truth for once. Take care of the house. You deserve it. You always did. Ethan, I read the letter once, then again, and then I put it in the back of a drawer in the library. Not out of spite, just as a reminder that the past doesn't vanish. It stays with us. But it doesn't have to define us. The next time I saw my parents was 3 weeks later at a quiet dinner Chloe and I hosted at the house. Eleanor brought dessert. Arthur brought a bottle of red wine, the good kind. There were no speeches, no apologies, no dramatic confrontations, just quiet laughter, small talk, a new kind of stillness. They hadn't changed overnight, but they were trying. And this time, I wasn't trying to earn their approval. I wasn't performing for scraps of affection. I was just me. When they left, Chloe and I stood by the front door, watching their taillights disappear into the distance. She looked up at me and asked, "You okay?" I smiled. Yeah, I really am. Later that night, I walked into the library and stood in the doorway, books neatly shelved, desk organized, hardwood floors clean and polished. The room was finally finished. But more than that, I'd lost a brother, but I'd gained something else, a life that no longer made space for people who only knew how to take. And as I turned off the light, the house finally felt quiet in the way I'd always hoped it would. Not empty. At peace. Looking back, was all that chaos and betrayal the only way to find this kind of peace?